Hello world, and welcome to this edition of Tech on Fire with Blaze. I'm Blaze Stewart, and today we're going to be looking at Istio on Azure Kubernetes Services. Hi guys, today we're going to be looking at using Istio with Azure Kubernetes Services, and the last two videos we've done in this little mini series on service meshes, we've looked at console and linkered. I'm using Istio today. It's probably the largest of these three options, and it certainly has a lot more features to cover, but there are some caveats I will mention along through the video that I discovered as I was working through this that you might want to consider when using Istio, simply because it does bring a lot more to the table, but with that comes a cost. But in any case, let's review what a service mesh is, and then we'll go into a demo and look at Istio in particular and what it does have to offer compared to the other two that we have been looking at. I've got two different files here that are Kubernetes manifest files that I want to use to deploy some services to Kubernetes with, and I want to bolt these up to that service mesh that I have deployed. Now, these look like pretty much any other manifest file that we've seen already. The main difference here is, as with the other two service mesh implementations that we've looked at with console and with linkered, you add some kind of decorator to it, in this way a annotation that tells the service mesh to inject that sidecar proxy into the particular pods that you're going to be running. So in this case, I have a deployment and I have three replicas of that deployment. So that means I'm going to have three different pods running as a part of this deployment. So what this is going to do is take each one of those individual pods and inject a sidecar container that is a proxy to each one of those different web apps that are running in each one of those pods. And so I'm going to end up with essentially one-to-one correspondence between all of my application pods and that sidecar proxy. So if I scroll through this, you'll see that I have that populated in all of these various deployments here. And the same thing is true here, where I have that sidecar deployment going on inside of my manifest files here. This one for Istio, simple, easy to add. So let's go ahead and look at how to deploy these in a quick demo for cranking these up. And then we'll go in and look at some of the telemetry that these will generate once I start making requests against them. I'm here inside of a command line here with PowerShell, so I'm going to actually deploy these. I've already created my Kubernetes cluster and installed Istio on it. There's some step-by-step instructions on how to do this on the Azure docs for using Azure Kubernetes services, so I'm not going to tell you how to do that, but it's very easy to do. It took me about 10 minutes to do. Once I had it up and running, everything was fine. My only caveat here is that you want to make sure that your VM size is big enough to handle Istio. Istio has got a lot of overhead, so you want to make sure you at least have a VM that's got probably at least 4 gigs of RAM at minimal. I would recommend going with something that's got more than that. So let's go ahead and apply these, and let's see what happens once I do this. And I have those by way of file, and I'm going to grow ingress.yaml, and I'm going to create my ingress.yaml, and then I'm going to do my route YAML as well, and it's going to create some services and some pods. So if I go kubectl get pods, I'm going to see a bunch of pods that are getting spun up here. And these are all of the pods that it's creating. And notice that they all have 2 of 2 ready here. And the 2 of 2 ready indicates the containers in each of these pods, indicating that there are 2 containers running, and one of those is my application container, and one of those is the sidecar that was injected into that particular pod. Now, whenever I specify my deployment, I only had one container in my deployment defined, but the sidecar injection is handled by Istio, so it's automatically done, just like we saw with console and just like we saw done with linkered. So now that those are ready, I can do a get services, and I can take a look at the actual services that are running. Here's the public IP address for one of these. So if I launch a browser here, I can then pull up a this particular backend service here that will let me see something that's going on. And it's just basically a web app. There's nothing particularly novel about this. It's just for giving me some information about the backend service that it's calling. So now I want to run JMeter against this so that I can look at some of the telemetry that it's generating with Grafana. So let's take this IP address, and I already have a JMeter session already defined here. Let me go ahead and update my JMeter configuration here with this new IP address. And I will pull that over onto the screen here in just a second after I get that in there. And then we'll kick that off to show you what this looks like. This is JMeter, which is a testing application. And what this can do is simulate loads. So let me save this real quick. And with this, I can have up to 750 threads going and a ramp up time of 30. So basically, it's going to try to make 750 requests against this particular load here. So now I'm back here in my PowerShell session, and I've got the command pulled up to start Grafana already. So I'm just going to simply type in istioctl, which is the Istio command line utility. And you can launch any of the dashboards from this. We'll look at another one in just a minute, but I'm going to look at Grafana first. And this is going to launch Grafana into a browser tab. And it's basically proxying it by way of the APIs that are available through the Kubernetes backend. So this one is just a Grafana dashboard, which is a utility for looking at stream data coming through whatever data source that you might have. And they basically use Grafana to create a number of dashboards that are already predefined. And the one, I mean, there's a bunch you can look at. There's performance dashboards for the cluster. You can look at different kinds of services. You can look at different the status of the mesh and so on. I'm mostly going to be interested inside of this workload dashboard here. And this is the one I want to look at just for the sake of getting some telemetry out of my particular cluster here that is being reported by way of that proxy. So this is where I'm going to use JMeter. So currently I don't have anything spun up right here. I'm going to come over here, and this is my backend service. So anything that comes into my backend service, I could look at any of these front end service, my backend service, and get telemetry in and out of these. And I can do that by making a request. I'm going to use the backend service because that's what's actually being proxied by that front end service. So it's actually making a call from the front end into the backend service and then sending that back out the wire back to my client. So to kick this off now, I have nothing going on. I'm going to go ahead and start my JMeter by clicking the play button, and that's going to start spinning up a bunch of load here. And I should be able to see some of that telemetry coming through my dashboard here as this ramps up. So we should be seeing that in just a second. Okay, there's the first pieces of data that are coming through. I have 14 IOPS for this particular load. It's going to spin that up, and then as soon as our load comes through, it's going to probably taper off around 30 to 40 IOPS per second. It could probably handle more than that, but the limitations, I was running into some bugs when I was running this inside of JMeter. That wasn't going to be allow me to handle a lot more load than what this is putting out. But in any case, you can see the telemetry now. It's coming in with Grafana, and then you can see how that is able to zoom in on that. I can kind of get some time slicing going on if I set my graph to look at that. And here's my incoming success rate, non 500 errors, and other types of data. Here's the response times and other kinds of pieces of information that you might find useful. So the test is done, so I can ramp it up again, and we'll see the data start flowing in through Grafana as well. So all in all, Grafana gives you some nice pre-built dashboards for this, but it's not the only tool that Istio offers for doing monitoring. I want to take another look at another tool that is available inside of this, and we saw a similar tool with Linkerd where it was able to view mappings between services. So let's hop over to Kyali, and we will look at that one, and we'll be able to see some of its telemetry as well. Now I'm back here inside of my PowerShell session. I'm going to launch Kyali, and let's go ahead and start this up, and it's going to launch a new browser tab for me here. Now, Kyali is another dashboard service that is another component of Istio, and we saw something similar to this whenever we were looking at the dashboards inside of Linkerd, and this one has the ability to view some of the same kind of telemetry that we saw in Grafana. So if I kicked off my JMeter test again against my backend, it's going to show me some of that telemetry right here in this little dashboard right here. And if I drill down into this, I should be able to see some things that are going on, as well as information about my services. So it's going to tell me the state of my services. It's going to tell me the nature of my workloads and so on. So if I clicked on traffic, I could see a couple of different things here. So requests per second and so on, wherein things are coming from, and other types of data about my particular workload here. So I clicked on front end app. There is my front end app, and this particular front end app is healthy. Again, one pod, and it's a single pod with a single node in it that is receiving telemetry that is talking to my backend app. Now, the coolest part about this is this particular graph here. Now, this is a trace graph of the traffic that is coming into my particular cluster here. And this particular app shows me the direction of the flow where things are happening. And the front end here, this is showing me the source unknown. That's really the traffic is coming in from the outside world. That would be my ingress, and it's coming into my front end service. This is indicative of a service here. And then it's coming into my front end app. Then my front end app then is making requests to my back end app here. And then my backend app is making some requests here. And then it's turning around and reversing that flow here. We also see some telemetry right here related to different kinds of things related to my Node app 1 and my Node app 2. And this is coming by way of ingress as well. So all of these things are able to trace the traffic back through the path that is flowing through your cluster. So this is one of those cool types of tools that you can use for documenting the flow of information through your cluster, and it gives you some kind of visibility into where things are and where they're flowing with your cluster. So this is the last of the service mesh implementations that we're going to be looking at for Azure Kubernetes services. And this particular one I thought was fairly interesting with Istio, because Istio is probably the most popular service mesh implementation out there, but it is probably also the heaviest one. So just a few caveats I would mention, as I mentioned in the video, that it is fairly top heavy. So you will want to make sure that whatever you use for your node size when you're deploying this, have enough RAM to be able to run the pods, because it's going to be distributing pods across your cluster, and each individual node on your cluster will need to have a specific set of pods running on it. So you will have a lot of these more memory intensive applications that are running as part of your cluster when Istio deploys those. So you'll want to make sure that you have enough RAM. And it's also very opinionated when it comes to the version of Kubernetes that you are running. So make sure that you deploy the correct version of Kubernetes. As of the recording of this video, I think only up to 1.15 is supported with Istio, and the latest one that is the default in Azure is 1.16, and the Azure Kubernetes services will only let you go back to 1.15.11. So make sure that you are selecting the correct version of Kubernetes as well. So again, Istio is going to be behind the curve whenever it comes to versioning on Kubernetes. So make sure that you have the correct version of Kubernetes running when you deploy this, or you might run into some issues that I saw when I took the default version without actually looking at it, and I had to go back and undo that and recreate a cluster. Again, it didn't take long, fortunately, but for the demo, but it's just making sure that your versions match, and that's a good practice for anything when you go to deploy to Kubernetes, especially something like a service mesh. So just a recap with service meshes, we have Consul, we have Linkered, and we have Istio, and they all kind of do the similar things. They're mostly used for microservice architecture for supporting those, and they are the kind of the utility that you will need to be able to monitor and manage your workloads at scale. And certainly there's a lot of things that we could talk about with these that I haven't even begun to mention. Some of the patterns that are available through service meshes as well. I've basically looked at some of the visibility that it gives you and some of the tooling that it gives you for visualizing workloads inside of Kubernetes. But there's a lot more to these, and maybe in a future video, I might do a deeper dive into some of those kinds of things that you can do with these. But for now, these are the three that I would recommend: Consul, Linkered, and Istio, in that order, just making sure that you have the appropriate compute to manage those and to handle those. So we're going to be doing one last video in Kubernetes before we move on to another topic. I want to do a video on config maps, which we'll look at next week on Tech on Fire with Blaze. If you like this content, please consider visiting us online at www.wintellect.com, and there you can find about services that Wintellect offers, including training and consulting services. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel by clicking on the subscribe button and clicking the bell icon to get notifications when new content becomes available, and also comment down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at @TheOneMule, and also follow Wintellect on Twitter at WintellectNow or at Wintellect. We are constantly posting things about Azure-related technologies and things related to software development.
You can also reach us by email at consulting@winelec.com. Until next time, thank you.